for innovation of food processing in Africa's food systems. It is part of a large portfolio of work carried out by the University of Bonn, FARA, the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, Academia 2063, and the University of Hohenheim, funded by the government of Germany as part of the One World No Hunger. The program called Program of Accompanying Research for Agricultural Innovations brings partners from Africa, India, and Germany to conduct research on sustainable agricultural intensification, food system transformation, and food and nutrition security. We are happy to recognize my brother, Dr. Yemi, here, who is the head of FARA. And also we have Dr. Baumüller from the University of Bonn, ZEF, as well as Dr. Getau Tadesse, who are going to be our speakers in a minute. The work in PARI in general is to support local research by working closely, and we're doing it with about 30 research partners across Africa, India, and Germany, across more than 15 countries. A very productive undertaking, more than 200 publications since we started in 2024. The areas of research span from promoting equitable, resilient, and sustainable small-scale production systems to scaling innovations through investment in infrastructure and skills, building inclusive digital agricultural transformation platforms, and strengthening national agricultural research systems. Alongside the University of Bonn and ZEF, which in addition to research is making a tremendous contribution in training the future leaders in agriculture, I think we must have the largest post-grad program around the world, so thank you for that. At the side of Academia 2063, it is our Department in Policy Innovation, led by Dr. Klassen Glatzel, under the Malabo-Montpellier panel that works together in this endeavor. The panel, made up of 18 international leaders in science and food security and development, of which 80% are Africans, have made it their task to understand the recent transformation that has taken place across African economies, learning from the progress over the last 20 years to identify lessons that could be scaled up and scaled out. We work systematically under that program to take area by area and to look at all the difference that African countries are making. It goes from energy to irrigation, to mechanization, to food security, to trade, to bioeconomy, and you name it. So this program has allowed us to bring the two teams and our colleagues in India and in Germany to work with FARA and a large number of African researchers to bring evidence to support the programs on the ground under the One World Zero Hunger. It is now my distinct pleasure to invite our two speakers of today, Dr. Heike Baumüller from the University of Bonn, PARI coordinator and senior researcher at the Center of Development Research with the ZEF acronym in German. So Heike, the floor is you, and she's presenting about the potential to reality, transforming Africa's, her presentation is yes, from potential to reality, transforming Africa's food systems. Heike? No, it's employment opportunities in the African agro-processing sector, right? So the other one is for Getau. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. We have a PowerPoint presentation because I want to share some data with you, and that always helps if you have some visuals. Can we put it on, please, the technicians? Thank you very much. You can move on straight away. So we have conducted a number of studies in various African countries with our national partners there who help us in the data collection and data analysis. And we focus specifically on employment opportunities in the food and beverage manufacturing sector. This is on the formal manufacturing sector we focused on to show you some of the results that we collected. Next slide, please. So what we are finding in our study from Ethiopia, Ghana, and Tunisia, we are finding that the agro-processing sector is very labor-intensive, in fact, amongst the highest in manufacturing. There's high employment elasticity, which basically means where output is growing, we also see jobs being created higher than most other economic sectors. The number of jobs in absolute terms is still quite small, but is growing and accounting for quite a large share of manufacturing jobs. We also see a high share of female workers. And importantly, it's not only the jobs that are being created in agro-processing, it's also the backward and forward linkages that are very strong. So be it in, for example, production of raw materials, in logistics, in retail. And if this is, as I said, is only the formal businesses, if we include informal firms in this, for these 3 countries, we estimate the employment number to be 5 times higher, but we don't have actual statistics on that in detail. Next slide, please. So what sorts of jobs are actually being created is what we wanted to know. This is now data coming out of Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa, where we interviewed close to 500 firms in the food and beverage manufacturing sector. And what we are finding is, first of all, is very diverse. So you have a very diverse range of jobs that are being created, and you also have diverse range of skills. So around a quarter, we would qualify as high-skilled, around a quarter medium-skilled, and then about half low-skilled. So you see that there's a lot of opportunities for different types of educational levels in the agro-processing sector. Next slide, please. And I was saying earlier there's a high share of women in the agro-processing sector. So what jobs are women actually doing in the agro-processing sector? So the interesting colors to look at here, it's a bit complicated, but the interesting colors are the greens, because they show either particularly low or particularly high employment of women. So one thing is very clear, a lot of women work in clerical support. But what we're also seeing is that not a lot of women work in technical professions, so technicians or operators is very low share of women. And what we find encouraging is that there's actually a fairly high share of women in management and in high-skilled types of professions, more so than in low-skilled types of professions. Now the next slide. And in fact, the research focused on trying to understand the level of mechanization and automation in the African food and beverage processing industry. That was what we set out to study in those 4 countries. And mechanization is just the use of power-driven machinery, and automation is the use of computer-controlled systems, so more sophisticated. And one thing we found is that all companies, virtually, be it from micro to large scale, are mechanized. They're all using some machines in some form, and almost half of them are also automated, so using computer-controlled systems. And you'll see from this graph where I highlighted the different steps in the production process where there is mechanization and automation, you see that it's everywhere. It's along the entire process. There's more in processing and packaging, but still, you see there's a lot along the entire process, especially when it comes to automated companies. So the question now is, how is that impacting employment? It could increase employment, because if you increase productivity, output, you might generate new employment, but it could also replace employment, because you might replace laborers with machinery. So next slide, please. So here we asked, how has your staff composition changed since the last investment in machinery or in automation? So the first interesting color is the yellow, because that is basically showing that there has been no change in staff composition. And in particular amongst the mechanized companies, that is the dominant color. But what's also interesting that especially when you then move to automation, like the next step in sort of Industry 4.0, you're seeing more dynamic staff changes. So you have more companies saying we increased staff, so that's positive, but you also have more saying they decreased staff. And in particular, this is amongst the low-skilled labor. So we do get the suggestion that there might be a shift towards more higher-skilled labor. Next, please. We also wanted to find out what the gaps are. What skills are actually missing? Which training do we need to invest in? So we asked about different types of skill gaps, and it's quite clear what we are really missing primarily is technical skills. So in the mechanized companies, it was mainly working with machinery that was missing. And in automation, working with computers. It's not surprising because we're talking about computer-controlled systems. What's also interesting, I want to draw your attention to the soft skills, because we know from the literature that if you move towards automation in Industry 4.0, you get more demand for soft skills. And this is what we're seeing here as well. This is what the automated companies were saying. We need people who have analytical skills, who are motivated, who adopt new technologies, who are team workers. So this is it's almost, pretty much twice as many people amongst automated said that. But also, these are all the gaps now. But we are also seeing that almost 2/3 of companies actually said they're not missing any skills, that they actually have the skills that they need in their companies. So the majority says we are fine as it is. We also thought that was an encouraging finding. Next, please. And this goes with this slide I wanted to show you around the relative importance of staff-related constraints. So yes, there are quite a few companies that are talking about we have problems getting highly qualified staff, they're not available, they might be too expensive, they might leave too fast. But really what is a problem for those operating machinery is machine-related constraints, is the unavailability of spare parts, it's hardware malfunctioning, and it's primarily power failures. And this was, it's a bit different between the countries, but still across the board in all countries, power failures was the number one issue that affected use of machinery. Next one, please. So this is my almost concluding slide, sort of looking a little bit ahead and summarizing what I said, as we have an anticipated growth in the sector, in the agro-processing sector, with changing diets, urbanization. With the current crisis, we don't know how this is really going to work out, but in terms of projections, we are expecting growth. But it doesn't mean that jobs will be created. And this is why we find that you need conducive framework conditions that guide this development. It can't just be, if we have more demand, we'll have more agro-processing and we'll have more jobs. It won't be automatic like that. There will need to be investments and there will need to be guidance in the processing sector. So one is we need to invest in technical skills, especially amongst women, which are severely underrepresented amongst the technicians. We need to invest more in soft skills if we want to move towards automation. Upgrade infrastructure. It's often said in these venues that that is what we need to do, but it can't be said often enough. We need to strengthen spillover effects. So don't just grow the agro-processing sector, we need to grow also whatever feeds into the agro-processing sector and wherever the agro-processing products actually go to. And the last point is I actually really want to stress, it's not just about quantity of jobs, how many we create. This is what we often talk about. One issue is in Africa is not just unemployment, but it's underemployment. Can you live off your work? Do you have stable jobs? And if you want to make the sector attractive to the youth, then you need to have a quality of jobs as well, and there needs to be investment in that as well. So now comes my last slide. This is actually just something I wanted to highlight. One more. Next one, please. This is a book I wanted to highlight, which we recently put out. It's sort of summarizes some of the research we've done. It's trying to address the question, how can we increase food production within Africa using African resources? So this is really summarizing a lot of the research we've been done. There's authors from Africa, from Germany, from other countries as well. And this is a book, so you might not want to buy the book, but there's a free preprint which is almost the same, which you can just download, and we have flyers at the back if you're interested in the topic. And
all right, thank you, Heike, for a great presentation. I think what your numbers confirm is the importance of the agro-food industry in the production systems and the value chains in Africa. And what we certainly do know is already now, most of the demand that's growing in terms of food consumption is concentrated heavily around these processed traditional staples, not even your caviars or cheese, but our cassavas and millets and what have you. The importance is just not the job it creates, as you've talked about, but also it's going to be now the main bridge between smallholders and consumers. Where the processing sector goes, that's where smallholder farming is going to go now. You cannot sell your millet directly to the consumers or your cassava. It has to go to the processing sector. So the innovations that Heike talked about here, the competitiveness, the performance of the processing sector is going to be driving our production systems altogether. And that takes me to the next topic of this afternoon by Dr. Getao Tadesse, my colleague at Academia 2063, the director of the Department of Operational Support. He also has been at ZEF, which has really provided quite a lot of high talent to the continent. So thank you, Heike, to you, and perhaps a message from us to your management. So greatly appreciated. So Getao is going to talk about from potential to reality, transforming Africa's food production. So Getao, welcome.
Okay. Can I have the slide? Yes, a little bit different where I'm talking about innovation. Yes, okay. Yeah, I think all these issues about food processing in African context, they have been summarized in the previous book that have been presented by Heike previously. But I'm just talking about innovation in African agri-food processing sector patterns and pathways. And based on the World Bank enterprises surveys for many of the African countries, and we try to extract some data, for the food processing sector. So based on those data, I will talk a little bit about the patterns and the pathways. Please, the next slide. So I think one of the challenges that we have for African context is how to define innovation. I mean, innovation might be a different context. In different contexts, it might be different. I mean, generally we have the OECD definition, which has been improved over time and through a lot of discussions, and then through the Oslo Convention, then they defined it just like any improved or new practices or process or combinations that differ significantly from the previous products and business processes. I think this is a very wide and general definition that has been provided by these conventions. But when it comes to the African context, I think we should be clear on some of the specific contexts that we have in the continent. So I think we don't expect very high-level technology-based innovation, because for Africa, we have a lot of indigenous technologies at farm levels and also in the processing sectors. If you go to different cities of Africa, in the streets and everywhere, you see a lot of innovative food processing, small and medium enterprises in terms of packing, in terms of new product, in terms of different products that can easily be sold on the streets. And also we have to think of imitation as well as invention. Probably we may not need to invent new ideas, but there are a lot of technologies, there are innovations across the world, so might be imitation can also be a good source, and so we have to also expand our definition to include imitation. And product as well as process innovation. I think definitely we don't even expect new products, especially for the food process sectors, but it's a little bit a different way of presenting the products and also delivering the productions, the foods, and all this might need some sort of process innovations. And we also identify between inputs and outputs of innovation, like ICT technologies and technology innovation systems. Those are inputs for the firms to develop their process and product innovation. And also we have to mind about the sectoral variation because of some economic differences. So then I think based on from the data, once we define the context and everything, we just looked at how really innovation is important. You have seen from Heike how important it is for employment generation, but we also simply looked at how that's important for value addition and trade. And you will see different graphs you can go through if you are interested. Maybe probably some of the specific data will be presented in our research conference next month. But just to highlight some of the findings, that firms with innovation have higher share of value addition and higher rate of trade participation than firms without innovation. It's very clear, actually, it's very known, but our data also confirms that we found that it's very significant in terms of value addition, because we have been asking them how much intermediary products they have and how much is the total sales of the firms and how those innovative firms have contributed to that. And then, unfortunately, the role of innovation seems higher in food processing. That's fortunate, but I think it's because of the structure of the African economies, because we are seeing that a lot of economic grows in agricultural grows, then the innovation in the food sector is much higher than the role it plays for other sectors. That's why we focus too much on the innovation aspect of food processing sector. Next, please. And then I think we looked at the level of innovations. I think, unfortunately, only one third of the firms adopt new or improved innovations from all the data we have. And also, we see even their investment on research and development is significantly low. Only 1/5 of the firms that have been interviewed by the World Bank data series from Africa, they invested on research, which shows that there are a lot of things to be done. And also, unfortunately, despite the high potential of the agro-processing sector in African economies because of urbanization and income growth, but we didn't see any significant difference between food processing and non-food processing sectors in terms of innovation across firms. Next, please. Next slide. Yes, and the bad thing that we also witnessed from the data set is that unfortunately the level of innovation is declining over time for the different case countries we have. For example, the first panel, the left-hand side, it shows that surveys that have been conducted during 2011 and 2015. And then the right side, you see that it is, these are innovation, level of innovations based on the surveys that have been conducted in 2016 and 2020. So if you look at the graphs, unfortunately, the level of innovation is declining. I don't know why, how to explain this, all these things. We are trying to get more data and to explain it, but we just want to share what's available data. Next, please. And then I think what are the drivers, what are the pathways for the firms to be innovative? And basically we divide these drivers into 4 groups. The first one is just like the emerging demand side opportunities that have been created in the economies because of economic growth and because of urbanizations, and all those might be some of the issues that have been driving these things. And also we looked at some market institutions like innovation systems and industrial clustering and parks and all those things, how really are important all those things. And also the firm level capacities, because the firm capacity in terms of their connection with international companies and also their participation in the innovation inputs like ICTs and all these things. And also we looked at how regulation is important. So basically, if we want to have a very innovative agro-processing sectors in Africa, we have to consider these pathways. And then empirically we tested them and which one is the priority. So the next slide, please. And then from our empirical analysis, we found that economic growth is very critical for firms to innovate. And we compare those countries who have been growing for the last many years by 6% or above. And we compare with firms in the countries where their growth rate was lower than 6%. And I think many of you understand why we choose 6%. And we found that growth in countries where there is significant economic growth, firms are really innovating more than the others. And in terms of firms' capacity, I think Heike has said that the involvement of women in the management of these firms is higher. But the good thing is also here, what we found is in firms where the top managers are female and young, they innovate more than the ones where the managers are male and older people. So this is a very significant difference, maybe because youngsters and females are more risk averse and all these things. So I think we have a lot of other data. And then the last slide, I conclude with the last slide. So I think the take-home message from my presentation that despite emerging opportunities in the food processing sector and its role for value addition and trade, only few firms are still innovating. And unfortunately, it's also declining over time. That requires high policy attention. And also building market institutions and investing in ICT infrastructure are more important than regulatory policies because the firms are not yet there for patent rights, property rights, and all these things. So this is the stage where African firms are investing on. Requires some sort of institutional interventions more than regulatory interventions. So that's the message I have from my presentation. Thank you. Back to you, Osman.
Thank you, Getao, for a brilliant presentation, as well as thank you to Heike as well for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to invite the panel to join me on the floor here, starting with Mr. Birasa Nyamulinda, Chief Executive Officer of GACO Meat Company, formerly advisor to Rwanda Development Board. Karibu. I'd also like to invite Ms. Victoria Sabula, Chief Executive Officer of Africa Enterprise Challenge Fund. Karibu. Next, Engineer Dr. Dorothy Okello, Dean School of Engineering at Makerere University, Uganda, and a proud member of the Malabo Montpellier panel. So welcome, Dorothy. Karibu. Next is my friend and brother, Ishmael Sunga, Chief Executive Officer, Southern Africa Confederation of Agricultural Unions, also a member of the Malabo Montpellier panel. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Alex van der Langenberg, COO, Chief Operating Officer of Hollanda Fair Foods Limited. Welcome, Alex. And last, but not least, Oga, or even Igwe, Yemi Akimbamijo, Executive Director, Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, and one of our key partners around the PARI program. So I think that there is not a mic there for me, so I'll just be probably leading the discussion from here, if it's okay with the organizers. So welcome to all of you. Is there a mic there? Okay, thank you. We've got up to 5 minutes to the top of the hour. So I'll be asking each of you one question, and I would ask you to be brief and to the point, if you can, so that we can have a second round and also a good discussion with the audience here. We just completed with a discussion of innovation and technology in the food processing sector. If you allow me, I would start with Dr. Yemi Akimbamijo. And my question, sorry, I catch you having go ahead and have a sip while I'm formulating the question if you want. So we've seen how important innovation is for the agri-food processing sector, both from the presentation of Heike and Getao. So my question for you would be, what would you see as the key elements for a conducive innovation system which will support the African agro-processing sector? What are we missing there to get a system in place that can promote innovation in the growing agri-food industries? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Osman. It's a great pleasure for me to be a part of this wonderful panel. Now, the subject of innovations is very central to the work that we do in FARA. You may recall that FARA led the whole concept of the innovation platforms approach. But based on what has been presented today, and especially the second presentation, that shows a worrying decline of innovations. And the presenter did say that he couldn't explain why and how. But this is a very important element in the evolution that we are beginning to see on the continent and on the efforts that are being made. And I ask myself also this question, and maybe somebody has the answer in the audience. The question is this: we've got the human resource, we've got the natural resources, we've got the very good will of partners and donor community to support the work we're doing on Africa, to make Africa food secure. Based on, and given all of these, put it this way, we've got all the ingredients, but yet the food is not coming out. So something must be intrinsically amiss. So what I can then propose in a direct question, as a response to your question, is the lack of what I describe as a holistic engagement that can help the needle to shift. Because for such a long time, we're talking about the same subject. I mean, innovation platform approach started even in the days of Monty Jones, and still we have not broken these jinx. So I think the whole concept of having a deeper reflection on a holistic approach that can help, break this glass ceiling and help us to make the right decisions to shift this continent forward in terms of our efforts on, driving Africa's food balance and keeping the continent food secure and all the things we need, I think is becoming crucial.
Superb. I think the key word there is a holistic system, especially if you want to really move the needle. It's true Africa has made tremendous progress over the last 20 years. For all of us who have been accustomed to looking at the graph of agricultural productivity growth and seeing the African line at the bottom, if you look at the last 20 years, Africa's line is on the top compared to all regions of the world. But we're coming from far behind. There's so much more that needs to be done to move the frontier. And I think innovation and technology is going to be part of it. So I'm going to turn to Dr. Okello, in particular, the transition to Industry 4.0. I think that's where we're going. We are moving towards very rapid transformation of urban food systems in particular. Urban demand, which is growing by the hundreds of billions, is all around processed food. How we can compete in those markets to claim a share, to defend it, and to expand it will depend a lot on our capacity to innovate and how we embrace Industry 4.0. So my question was, where do you see agro-processing firms in Africa vis-a-vis the need to innovate, to embrace agriculture innovation, Industry 4.0? Where are we and what do we have left to do to get there? Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I think that's a very interesting dilemma that we find ourselves in, especially if you look at what the background we got from the two papers that were presented earlier. One in terms of mechanization and automation, bringing in the 4IR, but then also looking at innovation going down. So what's happening with that? I think one, and coming from a background in academia, is how do we complete the loop between academia and industry, where we've been trying to do quite a bit of work, but then also the community engagement. So we get the agro-processors in, and then we can infuse more of the mechanization, even at a low scale, to the big scale, and address what is also a big challenge we have in Africa. And speaking from the perspective of Uganda, we have youth underemployment. And then we say that the youth love the technology, and technology presents a really great opportunity for the 4IR. So how do we connect those dots together so that we can promote more of the agro-processing? And a lot of our countries, agriculture is really the backbone of our economies, or what keeps most people engaged. So if we can then infuse technology at the different levels, even at the level of the villages, with the women's group, the youth groups, and bringing technology into those spaces at that level, we can do what we're looking out in terms of intensification. It was shared earlier in the presentation that a lot of these spaces are involving women. And women have multiple tasks that they're taking care of. So mechanization and automation, not only helping in terms of boosting the innovation space that we can have around agro-processing, but also solving problems of labor challenges and time challenges for the women who are largely involved in those spaces. So maybe let me just close with the challenge that I put to the students from the School of Engineering. Our slogan is "We're the home of innovation." And so my challenge to them is when they go back home or when they go to visit their grandparents, besides the fact that they're studying engineering, what else about what they're doing in the local community proves that they're the engineers they claim to be? Not that innovation is only engineering, but, well, we need to start from somewhere. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think connecting the dots, infusing a system of innovations across the different levels, the holistic system that Yemi was talking about, are what we need to be there. It's a culture of innovation. It's a whole system that open the doors, give us the skills, create the modalities, the regulatory environment for us to innovate. So let's see what's happening at the country level. When I turn to Mr. Birasa, Nyamulinda. In Rwanda, the government has implemented various program interventions to support the development of local manufacturing. Based on what we just heard, but also beyond that, which of those programs do you find to be the most instrumental for food manufacturing in general? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I really want to thank so much what my colleague said over there about the holistic approach. And I think that is actually the best way to go if you want to improve and make the sector grow, and of course create the employment to all people, especially women and young people. So for the case of Rwanda, government has done a lot in that area, particularly in terms of the investment areas and also promoting the agro-processing. We are currently towards the end of the PSTA4, which is our transformation policy or program for the sector that takes normally 4 years. And the whole process is about transforming from the subsistence to the knowledge-based agriculture. Now, in relation to this, I would say that I would try to summarize the whole interventions in 3 areas. One of them being on the de-risking, to ensure that the private sector is more facilitated to do the investment in manufacturing and also, putting their capital. There is a program that was initiated in 2020, right after the COVID-19 that actually affected the economy at different levels. And this is actually in terms of facilitating, the private investors to get access on the financing. Now, this one, which is called Manufacture to Build program, it targets, all sectors in manufacturing. Of course, agro-based industries being one of them. Now, if you check on this program, for a company to benefit from that, financing, scheme, for other sectors, normally the minimum requirement is about $1 million US. But for agribusiness or agro-based industries, it goes below up to 100,000. And that as alone is a catalyst to make sure that people can invest in the sector. And as we speak today, we have got more than around 247 million USD that companies actually have been, benefiting out of that program, which is an encouraging, indicator that is going to help in terms of transformation and also innovation in the agribusiness. There are so many others, particularly when it comes to processing. One of the challenges that most of the industries are facing is about the availability of raw materials. And this area, government has done a lot. You can talk about industries, but so long as you depend on raw materials from other places, you are always at risk. So government has invested a lot in terms of upgrading and increasing the raw materials, being on the part of grains and some other types of crops. We have a program called the CIP. CIP is a crop intensification program that is trying to mobilize especially smallholder farmers to grow crops in a consolidated way. And with that, of course, we get a large amount of products, and it also becomes very easy in terms of marketing those products. So it makes it easy for processors to get raw materials at high quality, and also availability becomes very, very easy. These are some of the initiatives. There are so many others, and maybe I can just conclude on one, which is related to the incentive in terms of promoting the private investment. Very recently, government approved the incentive code that provides the incentive to the private investors, especially when it comes to importing, like inputs that are required for agro-processing and also mechanization. When they're coming here, they don't pay any duties. And that is very, very important in terms of supporting private investment. Thank you.
Excellent. Very good. So 2 key words here that I will pick up on: the de-risking and the sourcing of raw materials. So I'll be coming to Victoria on the de-risking, but let me ask Ishmael about the sourcing. There are 2 parts of the sourcing, right? Coming from the supply side, but also you going in there as processors and manufacturers to get it. On that second part, I'll be talking to Alex on that. But let me start with Ismail. How do you see our smallholders ensuring a steady supply of high-quality raw material to the emerging processing sector? Where do you see the hurdles there that need to be overcome for that to take place?
Hello?
Please go ahead, Ismail.
I can't hear myself. So you're hearing me?
Yeah, we hear you,
Okay,
but
thank you. Something wrong with my ears then.
okay, you need the mic though.
No, I'm talking about it.
Pull the mic next to you.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
I think going just along the lines of innovation, I think innovation is about many things, one of which is the ability of a farmer or a community or an entrepreneur to design solutions to the problems they face. And that might be in terms of processes, could be in terms of actual activities, could be in terms of mechanization and the rest of the stuff that has been said. But it all starts with the realization that you are in pursuit of a certain objective, which might be that you want your enterprise to thrive and prosper. And that should be the driving force to enable you to have the aggression and appetite to change. If it's not within you, a farmer or otherwise, then it won't work. So it starts with an idea about how can you turn that problem into an opportunity, and how then do you find creative ways of dealing with it. It's no longer something you read from the book. It's something that you have to understand the entire ecosystem that agriculture in general has become science-based, has become data-driven, has become ICT-enabled, is constantly changing. So if you understand that, you need to find ways of innovatively navigating through those things. For instance, take the classical problem that smallholders face. It is one of fragmentation. Fragmentation is a major issue. But if you look at it, it might actually be where the opportunities lie, because you can use very sure ways of aggregating. But it's not something that you get a copybook telling you that this is what you do. You just have to understand the resources that you have around you, and perhaps as an entrepreneur, just go for it and see how it works. Policy engineering, for me, innovation is much more residing in policies and digital solution, because you can engineer policy to make and to nudge entrepreneurial development in a certain direction. And it could be just through removing VAT or using fiscal and monetary policies to encourage certain behavior. It could be consumer behavior, it could be consumer demand. So I'm trying to say, if we can go outside the conventional paradigm of innovation that is linked more to equipment and technology, and go much more towards innovation of ideas. We're working with a group of young agripreneurs. You'll be amazed to see the amount of innovation that is taking place, even in the area of feed, that they are now going for maggots.
Can I put on that innovation idea that you have, right? How can we help smallholders capture a larger share of the raw material markets that the agro-processing sectors need? Where do you see hurdles of getting African smallholders providing more and more of the raw materials that these processing companies need? Where do you see innovation there, for example? What is the space for that?
Okay, I'll talk in basic terms. If it makes money to the farmers and it's profitable, they'll go for it. So one of the fundamental problems is that the value chains don't deliver to the farmer. They deliver to the entire chain. So unless if you start pushing more resources, and to me it's an innovative approach, more of the value created along the chain towards those that bear the highest amount of risk, you are going to find excitement and change. It might not be defined classically as innovation, and there could be blockchain arrangements to be open and transparent about the sharing of risk and reward along the way. So for me, that is the deal breaker. push more money towards the farmers, and we'll see how they behave.
Excellent. Thank you. Let me then, I'm sure Alex will have a couple of things to say there. Pushing value more to the farmers is a way to unlock the supply of raw materials. But from your point of view also as a CEO of a manufacturing company, are there other things that can be done for you to have a steady supply of raw materials for your operations?
Yeah, from our perspective or from our point of view, we've been thinking to help farmers make crop rotation profitable by interlinking value chains among food manufacturers who operate in the scene. So, for example, for us as Hollanda Fairfoods, we produce potato chips. So our main crop focus is, yeah, obviously potatoes. However, in an ideal world, our farmers will not grow only potatoes, they rotate with other crops. This directly impacts their income, or this directly impacts the yield and quality of each separate crop they grow, and also a more of a long-term soil health. And if the yield and quality of what they grow increase, that is good for us as a business, but also good for the farmer and his income. However, what we see, or what we often get as feedback, is that for the farmer, his rotational crops, it's not as easy to find a steady market for. So he depends on one cash crop, which in our instance is the potato. But however, with the occurrence of more food manufacturing businesses in the ecosystem, we could link as private sector parties our value chains in a way that our farmer of potatoes will no longer be only a potato farmer who depends on this one cash crop, but he starts rotating with, for example, garlic or onions or whatever other crop you can think of, which other businesses may need. Yeah, this will help all the companies who need raw materials from the farmers, because the quality will increase, and also the yield, as I said, and it is good for long-term soil health. And I think also it is best for the farmers and their families, because their income gets spread out evenly over the year instead of having peaks of income resulting from one cash crop.
Superb. I think that's a very good point to end on before I go to the question and answers, because you're creating a whole new set of issues that government policy has to deal with, in partnership with the smallholder organization, the cooperative systems, to bring in the support that allow smallholder farmers to cater to the different needs of the value chain, rather than just relying on the industry or the processing sector to be the driver there. So you have to bring that kind of effort to aggregate, but also to allow integration and organization of the smallholders. So let me turn to the audience. I hope, oh, shoot. That is the most important one, isn't it? Right? We're talking about the de-risking, right? What I wanted to hear from you, Victoria, you've been operating this Enterprise Challenge Fund for a while in providing innovative commercial support to commercial businesses in the agribusiness sector, right? So from that experience you've amassed over this time, what would you say are some of the key success factors to enable agribusiness to thrive? De-risking, access to finance, or what do you see there as the key factors that we all need to keep our eyes on? Thank you.
If I was the only woman on the panel, I'd have said, oh, what's going on? But very luckily we're two of us, so you're safe.
The organizers are safe.
So it's interesting, because the first thing I'd go to is actually, finance, but I actually want to start with the enabling environment, because it doesn't matter the capital that is made available, the skill set that is available in the market, if the environment does not allow for the dynamism of the private sector. And this is really looking at deregulation. Do you have to have as much restrictions, and how do you assure that the restrictions that you provide are those that actually will not constrain the growth of private sector enterprises? Financial markets must work. You go into spaces like Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, and the SME that is working there who has to bid for particular currency to be made available for them to make orders in, from a different market, is competing with, the one who is in South Africa, who possibly can just very easily access all of the amounts that they need in whatever form of currency that they need. So we need to think about financial markets, capital controls, and how that is servicing the private sector. We need to think about infrastructure, because we tell smallholder farmers, we will support you to access European markets and get better prices. The roads need to lead to where these markets are. Everything needs to work. We have to have credit protection. It has been proven that markets that actually allow realization of collateral, return of capital to investors, enforcement of contracts, have a smaller gap between the larger businesses and smaller businesses in terms of financing. So if I give you my money and I collateralize it, I'd better realize that collateral. So that's enabling environment. The other thing is the availability of capital in a form and structure that makes sense for the SME. Sub-Saharan Africa's SME requires 10 years that go to 7 years and 10 years. Trust me, I've worked with SMEs for a long time and AECF for 10 years. We have 10 years of 3 years and 5 years. We want them to repay every month. They are going to get a bulk payment in 6 months subsequent to them making a shipment. Having structures that work for them, providing for viability gap funding where we allow for these innovations that are exceptional from the continent to make sense. Look at YYTZ in Tanzania, which is one of our companies. It is in the cashew nut value chain. We funded them and they work with smallholder farmers, and we de-risked for them to actually capacitate the smallholder farmers to get the right quality, the right quantities, but they required help to support with the standards, HACCP. They required help to inbuild e-commerce platform into their website. But when they are doing this, they don't have the money to pay back. They are relooking at their processing capacity. We are helping them to advance. And the reason why they succeeded is that our capital is public funding that is made available for the private sector. They don't have to return it. When they return it, it is at a time that it actually works. And it allows for them to prove that once smallholder farmers are bankable, it is possible to process within Tanzania or export to external markets, and subsequently commercial banks, private equity funds, debt funds are actually able to see, and they then invest. So then the final one is technical advisory support that works for Sub-Saharan Africa's SME. You look at early stage companies that are innovating, they are looking at how to automate, they are looking at how to better reach smallholder farmers, but they are also trying to source for that Series A capital or pre-seed funding. They require to know what financial models are. Go and talk to an SME who is seated here today and ask them, can I have your financial model and what is that? And you ask them, what is the capacity of your team? And they'll tell you, I have an accountant. An accountant who has a CPA one, I'm from Kenya. We have CPA, we have ACCA people, and then we have the investment analysts and CFA people. The accountant who is CPA one, who is affordable to the SME, will not do a financial model. But they need a proper CF4 who is able to engage with investors, present financial structures, determine why particular funding sources work. So we must make available the technical advisory support in a way that is useful for the SMEs, and I really champion for roving experts that are CFO level, go-to-market strategists, financial management people that are made available consistently over a longer period of time, even though independent contractors. And we've seen that work at the AECF, and our businesses, especially in the clean energy portfolio, have increased their sales 30% most once they hired the marketing experts, the finance experts, seconded to them on a longer term basis, so they don't have to make do with human capital that does not serve their stage of growth.
Super. Thank you very much. Thank you. What you're bringing out here is something that often has been an interrupted process. What I would call maybe moving towards policy reforms 2.0. There were times, most people here would not remember, it was a crime in Kenya to carry a bag of maize across district lines. There were times in some of the countries will tell you when you sell your product as a farmer, for which price and to whom. There were times when we had the parastatals that were completely excluding the private sector in processing. Those things we have reformed them. I call that negative policy reforms, getting rid of those things. Now we have to move into positive policy reforms. How do we work hand in hand with the emerging processing sector, filling all the gaps from creating the capacity for innovation, both process, operations related and product related, creating the capacity for skills upgrading, skills development, the farm management capacity building. Those are public goods and public services. We can expect to get them from the private sector, but we are not organized yet as countries to set up systems, holistics, at the different levels that allow us to do that. That's really the next frontier in creating that kind of environment that allows enterprises, companies and firms not just to be created and to perform, but to be able to mature and to grow and to expand and therefore compete, right? So I think this is really where the secret is going to be lying. So thank you to all of you, our panel. So let me open up for the first list of question and answers. Please, when you take the floor, state your name and ask, please, your question straight. If you go into comments, it's going to lengthen the time you need, and others will not be able to come to that. So please be brief, your name and your questions, and you're welcome to pick one of the panelists to address your questions to, or you just leave it to them, and then they will answer as they feel about that question. So let me start with the gentleman over there.
Thank you so much. My name is John Mukonya from the Agripreneurship Alliance. My question goes to the Dean from Makerere University. The issue of funding innovation skills development. University-industry collaboration is important. Research, development, knowledge transfer. But the private sector seems not to be playing part, yeah, to fund research and development. And you end up just increasing the number of students so that you get the finances that you need. So the question is, what is that innovative financing model that we can have in universities to see that you fund the skills development that you need? And is there a way you can also incentivize the private sector? There could be regulatory reforms, but other things that universities can do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Dorothy, you marked that question. Get a couple more, and then we go over to your answers. There is a gentleman in the back there, and then another one here.
Thank you. My name is Professor Kazambuga. I'm coming from Rwanda. My question goes to ED of FARA. If you look at the involvement of agriculture in Africa, you can see the priority from 70s to 90s was on the productivity, plant breeding, soil, and everything. That was well done up to the granary, the production. But the post-harvesting has very weak. Is there any way now you can change the model? And in the National Agricultural Research Institute, we have a vibrant food scientist who can develop a product, the packaging, and have functional certified laboratories which the private sector can go and learn from it. Our private sector are infant. They can't afford to pay for innovation. If they bring innovation without a back of research institute, then they end up failing and they lose money. The private sector needs to profit. They need to work on the profit. And the profit of private sector will drive the productivity and they bring to the production. University has got a laboratory. I know Makerere University. You go to any university, you know JKUAT in Kenya, they have students, they do good work, but they don't link with the research institute to have the whole bracket. Is that possible? Now, if you can help us to know, even the CG Center, surprisingly, they don't have food scientists. Because the CG Center don't have food scientists, they don't have a project to link with the National Agricultural Research Institute to work on the product development. They left that to the private sector, while we don't have a function of private sector. That was my question. If you can do that, we'll help. The last one, I wanted to talk the innovation platform. Goodness, you are with Nyamulinda. Nyamulinda was the head of innovation platform for Rwanda, Uganda, and the DRC, and they published it. Probably either of you can tell us how it status now of innovation platform. Was it taken over with the value chain members, or is it stuck? Because I know Nyamulinda published from that. That's what we need to know. You bring all stakeholders around the value chain, then they work together, then they end up working together. I know that is important because when you go to private sector, example is Uganda. Uganda potato farmers.
So can we just take the questions from there? So those two ones. So what can you do in the research systems? Thank you. What can you do in the agri-research systems to address the post-harvest segments? This is for you, Yemi, and for you and Mr. Our CEO here. What is the current status of the innovation platform? So let me take the last questions and I go back to you. Do you have a mic for him? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I am Wally Fatumbi, and I work for FARA, and I'm also a key member of PARI. My question goes to my good brother, my friend Biraza. It's good to see you again. You made mention of the truth that the government in Rwanda is working strongly around the production of raw materials. And it is clear that raw material is the base. Even if you make all resources available to the industry, when they can access raw materials easily, I mean, you mentioned it, that is the bottom line. But I observe also that raw materials will be produced by farmers if their enterprise is profitable and their livelihood is good. Often, the pricing of agricultural commodity is subject to the forces of demand and supply. And they can't preserve, so everybody takes it to the market. The price falls down beyond the cost of production. And especially for youth, they drop out. What is the innovative way that you are using in this country to ensure that there is continuous production, increase in production of these raw materials to meet the need of the expanding industry? Thank you.
Super. Thank you very much. So let me go to the answers here and I'll come back for the next round. So can I start with you, Dorothy? Please.
Okay. Thank you on the question. It's indeed a big task around supporting innovation. But I think my starting point is how we look at it holistically, looking at both the raw materials, in this case our students, since you specifically asked for that, but which problems are they going to work on? They're going to work on problems in the community. And what skills do they need? Both the technical skills to get this done, but also the soft skills. And again, I refer back to the presentations because they brought out those numbers quite well on that. And I think within that, that is when we can actually work more within the resources or within the envelope that we had, because you're asking about how are we going to fund this. So the first way is through collaboration. And through this, it's both private sector and government. So speaking for Makerere University, we have, and it's also now open to the other public universities, where government is injecting funds for the Research and Innovation Fund. And the priority areas that we are looking out for is that, number one, you must be solving one of our national development priorities. It must come out really clearly. Number two, we favor those that have industry partners or community partners. So you're really coming in from a research perspective, but from the word go, we are working with the community. So that is key. The other internship opportunities, because our students do have to go for internship. But now looking at internship from the side of the industry, not that the students have to come and learn and you have to make time for them, but actually while they're there, they can identify problems that can be solved and, at quote unquote cheap labor from the students, because they do have to get credit points for it. So that's the incentive right there. So how do we leverage more of those partnerships? So you're doing something for credit, but at the same time, you're solving a problem within the community or for a given industry. And so this could be challenge-based for the students who come up with the best ideas. So that's a motivation for them. The concept of living labs, again, in industry, and where you're also looking at multidisciplinarity, because I think the issue of the soft skills coming in is very, very important. And so we have initiatives that are looking, for example, how do you, in a rural community, and one of the ones we're working in, they do a lot with pineapples. So you have that, you want to process, you want to get juice, what happens to the waste that's generated out of that? What can you turn that into? So you have a circular issue, a circular problem that you're looking at. You're looking at biomass, you're looking at bioenergy, and then you're also looking at entrepreneurship. So how do you partner students from multiple skills, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's social work, because they need to understand the community and understand what their issues are. So it's really trying to see how we can work within our existing resources, and also in terms of, and because we're really focusing a lot on smallholder farmers, tapping into their resilience and understanding what it is that they were already doing to strengthen their abilities to cope with. You can look at both the negative and positive coping ways, and then see how you can use innovation to build up on that. So all those are different ways that we're trying to work with at least at Makerere, and I'm sure even the other, because we have partners with other universities, saying, first of all, using what we have, using the structures that we have, but leveraging on collaboration, both with government, the private sector, and the community, to drive innovation and different ways of getting the community and other challenges addressed, and in this case, for the smallholder farmers.
So thank you very much, Dorothy. Let me move to Yemi on the questions of the food system post-harvest research capacities, and then maybe briefly on the innovation platform before I go to Birasa. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more with Professor Kazunguka, if I get the name correctly. And that, for me, is really a question that I have reflected over and over. But the answer is not far-fetched. When you see a conference like this, or even agricultural scientific conferences gathering, you get all the disciplines around agriculture, but not food science and engineering. They are not always there. So what happens is that most of the work, when you look at Malabo Declaration, for example, says we must double yield, increase yield by twofold. When that yield is increased, if care is not taken, you only double the garbage post-harvest. But that's a scenario that we don't want, because we need to move the food biomass up to the shelf. Now, between the farm gate and the table is that space where food processing, food engineering comes into play. But they are the least engaged in the process. That's why we are more of primary producers on the continent. Now, let me draw just two examples of two products. If you look at, in West Africa, we have Bisa, that's hibiscus juice. It's not rocket science to bottle hibiscus juice. But where you need a little bit more of science in stabilizing produce, you need a lot of R&D to be able to get that post-harvest phase stabilized. Now, who pays for the R&D? The private sector is very risk-averse. It doesn't have the money for trial and error. But one example on the continent that I love so much is what happens in your country in South Africa, the CSIR. I was once invited to see the incubation facility at CSIR, where government picks up the cost of R&D, and an investor comes in and gets a kind of a cookbook recipe that is more or less 100% guaranteed that if you can run with this, you get this product. Now, we don't have the investment in R&D coming in handy. We have been eating pounded yam in my country for as long as what? We have not changed, we've not extended that process of getting pounded yam mechanized or digitized, because nobody is willing to pick up the bill of the R&D of the post-harvest phase. But we know that whereas data tells us that 40 to 60% is our post-harvest loss, if we are able to plug that hole using innovation and science, the food arriving on the table automatically doubles.
Yeah, the question is then, how do you get that into the R&D system? That's what he wants to know. He knows it's important, we need to do it.
Yeah.
In the system that FARA has been supporting countries to develop, where do you see the opportunity there in expanding the focus and bringing skills, activities, and research and innovation on dealing with
PARI is about program accompanying agricultural.
No, not PARI, FARA.
Yes, but we are part of the implementing agencies there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It is important that we get governments to be sensitized, and we've done a lot of policy advocacy to encourage government to invest. I mean, one of the goals is really using investment to drive development. But unless the policymakers are properly sensitized and we kind of change our mindset to really understand that unless we support incubations, we support innovations, we will not be able to break away from the challenges of post-harvest losses. It's not going to work.
That is clear. Thank you. And I think one of the problems there is really whatever is happening in the countries is project-based. There's a lot projectized stuff. Innovation on how you do millet is a project on that. Innovation on how you do cassava is a project on that. Innovation on how you do this is a project on that. But it has not been mainstreamed into the R&D systems.
That's
when
right.
it invests in that, that's the next step really where we'll need to go. So, Buona Birasa. So if you want to comment on that, but also on the innovation platforms, having been the coordinator across these 3 countries, where do they stand now?
Thank you so much. I'm happy that I'm here with the Professor Fatube and also Daniel. Actually, the innovation platform, we are very, very successful because we did this when we were trying to prove, the concept called the IAR4D, the Integrated Agricultural Research for Development, which of course brings together the components, the 3 components, the natural resources, the productivity, and also the marketing linkage, which I think probably we talk a lot about innovation, investment and everything. But innovation without a clear backup and without a clear mechanisms on the marketing, it will be difficult, to succeed. Because people put money in something because they want to get something else from that. So they invest money when they know that there's a market for their produce, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That's the most important part. Now, in terms of the current situation for these innovation platforms, the program, as you said, actually, it was more centered on certain products, particularly like for the case of Rwanda, Uganda, and DRC. We are targeting on milk, beans, maize, and Irish potatoes, 4 value chains. And at the moment, we have already the existing innovation platforms that are already, functioning. Like one of them in Rwanda, we have what you call Mudende Dairy, where they put a milk collection center that today is, selling milk to different parts of the country, but also the neighboring country of Congo. There's also for Irish potato. So they do exist. There's such kind of, legacy, but this was only the research. And which I think probably I might request my friend there from FARA and other partners there to think about how we can actually bring back, that initiative. It was very, very important in terms of bringing together different stakeholders to discuss and agree and come up with a common goal to solve a certain problem. That was very, very important. And I think it helps a lot. So there's actually legacy that you can see in terms of the impact of this program. Now, for the question about what Rwanda is doing in terms of sustaining agro-based industries with the raw materials, Rwanda has done a lot, and we are still doing a lot in terms of agricultural development. And one part of it is about de-risking, which I said earlier. If I give like a very simple example, the moment government is investing in a very big irrigation scheme called Gabiro. It's in the eastern province in a place called Nyagatare. We are developing around, in total, 15,000 hectares of land that's going to be developed with irrigation, infrastructures. And when it is ready, we bring in, private investors to lease, that can be partitioned into blocks. So people will be able to lease, that land and they started producing, which I think, of course, it will solve a lot the problem of raw materials. The other one, which I think matches from what the colleague said there about the post-harvest management. We know that there's a lot of post-harvest losses when it comes to agriculture, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. Rwanda, of course, without any exception. Now, we have done a lot in terms of investment in that area to ensure that we reduce the post-harvest losses, especially for the grains. We are promoting agro-based industries to process, these products. But the linkage between the smallholder farmer who's producing in rural area and a processor who's in Kigali or some other places, you find that there is a very low kind of linkage. So now, government has done a lot in terms of, putting a lot of emphasis and investments in the post-harvest management, losses. And you can see that it's actually helping a lot. A very good example, probably some of you know what we call the Africa Improved Food. When this company started, the initial years of its operation, it used to be buying, grains like maize and soybean from outside. But today, over 80% of what they process is being sourced from Rwanda, from smallholder farmers. It's because of that investment area in terms of the collection of the produce from the smallholder farmers. There is also the small-scale irrigation scheme, which of course is supporting smallholder farmers, and with that we see a lot of vegetables that people are producing because of that scheme, and it helps these agro-processors to get also raw materials to sustain their operations as well. There's also input subsidies that government has been implementing since 2006, and it's helping a lot to enable people to get access on these technologies, especially in terms of improving the yield. And lastly, without maybe going much into these strategies, there's also the market linkage, which I said earlier, and this is very, very important. A colleague from the private sector, he talked about the linkage between the company and smallholder farmers. Today, there's a lot of emphasis to ensure that the agro-based industries, they can also work with the smallholder farmers, especially through the contract farming. So they really sign these kind of contracts to ensure that farmers, they get assurance of the market for their produce, but at the same time, a processor also gets assurance of the raw materials. I was going to forget about de-risking, especially there's a program here, which is the insurance policy that is covering crops and also livestock in terms of helping farmers and other people to get compensated whenever there is a loss, and that of course helps them to go on investing into these kind of agricultural activities.
Thank you very much. So we got 5 more minutes or so. I can take a couple of questions, but not more. Are there any last burning questions? Yes, ma'am. Can you give her the mic here, please?
Thank you very much. My name is Salama Tsugarba from the Women Farmers Advancement Network, known as WOFAN. My question is, when it comes to linking the smallholder farmers to the off-takers, that is the millers, the processors, and so on, and we're talking about the risking, insurance, and so on, their capacity is very important. We also need to build capacity of these farmers in terms of negotiation skills, because they need that power to negotiate so that they don't run into losses, and that is one of the problems now. So how do we bring this innovation of bringing the different segments of contract farming? You know, there are different types of contract farming system. So if we are creative and innovative about this system and we build the capacity of the farmers, definitely it will boost the agro-processing industries. Thank you very much. My contribution.
Yeah, thank you. This is a very important one. Can I put you on the spot, Alex? What kind of skills would you want to see from the smallholder farmers in order to be able to successfully get into business with them? Where do you see room for improvement? Thank you.
I'm going to do my best to give a good answer. But I agree that it's a very good point. And for example, negotiation skills for the farmers are very key to maximize what they will get for their produce. A thing that comes to my mind immediately when I think of negotiation skills is also maybe apart from that they need to get it themselves, that there are also like the cooperatives where they can unite themselves and get, or how do you say, create a bigger bargaining power for the prices of their produce. So I think in addition to working on the skills, on the negotiation skills of farmers, that we should not underestimate the power of, for example, uniting them into certain groups or cooperatives. Yeah.
Excellent. You talk about cooperatives. You're sitting right next to. You're talking about cooperatives, and you're sitting right next to one of the big leaders of the cooperative movements in Africa. So, Ishmael, I'm going to give you the last word for a couple of minutes, maybe on that topic. Yeah.
Thanks very much, and thanks, lady, for bringing this to this platform, because I was fearing that the subject of innovation kept on going back to the default mode of technology and the rest of it. It's about people. It's about the pain points that they are experiencing. If it is about market risk, which is a major issue, climate risk, maybe the answer is not lying in technical solutions. It might be lying in other ways of innovation. As was said, it may be about organizing effectively. It might be digital organization to have mass and be able to influence. It might be about effective deployment of subsidies that will make it climate smart. So I'm trying here, my core is, I understand that technology is important. I understand that technical solutions are important, but a lot of the pain points of farmers are not about technical solutions, are about issues of fairness and equity in how the value chains are configured and how those are negotiated. If we can plant innovation there, we would have done a very good job. Yes, everything matters, but let's bring much more into social engineering, social innovation as a paradigm of going forward. Otherwise, we're going to be repeating the same thing and having the same results.
Excellent. I think that the three sets of skills really have to come together. Technical skills, commercial skills, but then social and organizational skills. None of them will go without the others. And that's really the secret. How do you bring those together around the smallholder farmers? I have one last burning question here that we'll take before we close. Do you have, I'm sorry, it's just going to be one question because time is running out. Do you want to take the floor?
My name is Naiko Julius. I'm the founder and CEO at Farmnera. What we do is we are applying blockchain technology to enable food exporters, ensure digital traceability, source farm inputs, and boost export market linkages. My question goes to the financials of the value chain, Miss Victoria Sabula. So we have this data collected along the value chain, and you realize most of the smallholder farmers don't have the collateral securities in most cases. And also the youth majorly as well don't have these in place. So how can we be able to, my suggestion is that if you can be able, the financial institutions can be able to, or financials be able to now consider looking into considering the data and rely on this data, especially on the past events like purchase of inputs over time, and be able to create score and be able to finance these players based on that. I think we should be able to boost our value chain and see real business booming along the different value chains. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. Do you want to take that one, Victoria?
I actually want to just agree with him.
Okay.
I think the greatest issue with commercial financials actually is data asymmetry. There is not sufficient data that is available to the financial institutions for them to be able to determine the risk profile of the youth agribusinesses, the women agribusinesses, and they need that in order to themselves expand the portfolio of this type of businesses. And I like that what you're doing in terms of blockchain, because that's exactly what the industry needs. Now, the important thing is how are you linking to the financial institutions, the commercial banks that actually would do well with the evidence that you're providing. But I think what we just must realize is that it's such a journey because the fiduciary mandate oftentimes of the commercial banks do not allow for them to go into riskier segments. Now, that availability of data actually de-risks and allows them to make more informed decision, and we should push as much as possible for that data to be available. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Please join me with a round of applause for our panelists. And thank you to all of those who have joined us here this afternoon. We're talking about agri-food industries and processing. It's just not the future of agriculture in terms of creating high-paying jobs and innovating and this kind of thing. It is the future of smallholder agriculture as well. Traditionally, we worried a lot about commoditization of smallholders. It was the roads, the bridges, the tracks and the trails, the markets and the rest. Today, you can have all the highways you want. You're not going to get your cassava consumed in urban areas unless it goes through processing. You're not going to get your millet, go find a way to the tables of the consumers unless it's processing. So what used to be your highways, your markets, is today your processing sector. It is the health, the competitiveness, and the innovativeness of the processing sector that is going to guarantee the survival of smallholder farmers. And with that, the thread of wealth, the spreading of wealth, assets, and better livelihoods in the rural areas as well. So this is a very important topic that we're discussing here today. And thank you to all of you for taking your time to join us. And thank you for those who organized the event here. Thank you to our colleagues from ZEF, from FARA, from Academia 2063, everybody, and of course for AGRF and AGRA for this event. So thank you to all of you and wishing you all a wonderful evening. Thank you and bye-bye.